The potential of a trade deal between India and the United States is quite real now. There is also a sense that the India and US relationship, which had seen the diplomatic ties at some level perhaps become a bit stretched, is being sought to be rectified. We've seen communication in the manner of social media tweets or messages from President Trump to Prime Minister Modi. They're both acknowledging each other, which in the context of the relationship is important. We've got a wonderful guest with us to look at the overall possibility of a trade deal between India and the US and where it stands from a global standpoint. Borge Brende is the President and CEO of the World Economic Forum, and he's a friend of NDTV's. Thank you very much, Mr. Brende, for being with us. Firstly, are you optimistic of a deal between America and India happening? Why do you believe this is important?
Yes, I am optimistic, and thank you for having me again on your show. US and India are natural partners, and India is important when it comes to services, but also increasingly in manufacturing. And the US want to diversify also in Asia. So I think the situation we've had in the last few weeks is not something that's going to continue. I spent last week in Washington, D.C. I'm now in New Delhi.
Give us the inside scoop of what you heard. Is it happening?
I think it's there is a clear will to now find a way. And I think it's also was unfortunate how it developed. But that is now, in my view, water under the bridge. The relationship between the United States, with 27% of the global economy, and China as the fastest growing of the large economies, is incredibly important. And I think they will find ways. And the exchange.
And India is the fastest growing of the large economies, right? As India. Yeah. But you mentioned China, which is interesting because when it comes to China, America is also talking about sanctions. There haven't been sanctions quite at the moment. They continue to import oil, for example. But in terms of a trade deal between America and China, do you see this as being also fundamental if we are to see, sustained growth and a resolution of trade issues?
It seems like there is a good momentum also in the negotiations between US and China. But I think they're more challenging because they're also big competitors on the new technologies. And we saw there was a deal now on TikTok where it will become American, but based on a Chinese algorithm. That's at least what has been reported in the media. But then there is news today that China will also then continue or introduce restrictions on NVIDIA and their semiconductors for import, because China wants to build their own chips and semiconductor industry. So I think the China-US relationship is a much more complex, and there's going to be fierce competition between these two nations. I think in the past we saw more a situation where US and India were closer in its collaboration. But what India also realized during this more intense period is that the export to US is important, but overall it's like 2% of China's of India's GDP. So it's also manageable, but of course it's a big market, and there are a win-win situation, and many Indian companies have also invested big FDIs in the US.
Sure. Mr. Brende, China is interesting because there is an attempt at resetting the problems between India and China. We've seen the Prime Minister travel to Tianjin for the SCO summit. And one of the points which did emerge, not just in Tianjin, but a few days prior to that, was when the Chinese Foreign Minister came to Delhi, where there appears to be an agreement that China may provide India rare earths. Now, that's obviously critical when it comes to semiconductors and an important part of our economy. How do you see the prospects of an improved economic relationship between China and India?
For the world, I think it's a good thing that China and India are speaking to each other, trading with each other. It's not a good thing if there is problems on the border. When it comes to rare earth, it is a real issue. Rare earth is not rare though. There's a lot of rare earth around the world, but it is not ripe yet, and you have to then start mining. So it will take some time. I think Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to India was also important. Also Prime Minister Modi's visit to China.
In just the last little while, in fact, about an hour prior to us starting this conversation, we've seen Ursula von der Leyen of the EU saying that she welcomes the potential of a trade deal between India and the EU. I'm just going to read it out because it's important. I'd love to get your views. Now's the time to double down on partnerships rooted in shared interests, guided by common values. With our new EU-India strategy, we are taking our relationship to the next level. We are committed to finalizing our trade agreement by the end of the year. How important is this?
It's very important. It's also in India's interest to diversify its trading. And there are basically four big trading blocks today. One, the US. The other one is the European Union, that is close to 20% of the global economy. And then we have China, that is also close to 20% of the global economy. And then I would say India. India is now the fourth largest economy in the world, but in a couple of years it will be the third largest economy. So here, in that context, we're talking about the G4, with India very much emerging. So for India to have a trade deal with the European Union as the second largest economic bloc in the world is incredibly important, but it's also important for the EU because the EU also wants to diversify their export.
Sure. We haven't addressed the bull in the China shop. India's continued import of Russian oils. India says it's linked to India's autonomy. Large country, we need to fuel our people, fuel our economy. America has problems with that. We're talking trade, but there is no clear indicator of that being an issue where India would necessarily bend. What are your views on this being a potential deal breaker as India and America talk?
So I think in this moment, this is being discussed between DC and New Delhi. After Russia's invasion in Ukraine, there was an agreement that one could continue to buy Russian oil, but at a discount. There was set a maximum price. And that was the precondition for then buying Russian oil. If that view now has changed, that one should not buy Russian oil at all, of course then that has to be discussed with India and the US, China and the US. But we should not forget that Russia is the third largest producer in the world after the US and Saudi Arabia. So that if you took out that Russian oil from the global market, it would possibly lead to higher oil prices.
An oil shock.
That's your words.
Exactly.
So we don't know the full implications of that because there is also spare capacity. You know, the oil price is not particularly high for the moment, but it will at least impact the market quite considerably.
Sure.
But this is also linked to the ongoing war in Ukraine. So US is putting more pressure now on Russia to end this war, to find a way out of it. So, of course, Russia is not very interested in ending up in a situation where they can't sell their oil, because that is now 80% of their revenues, and the oil and gas. So, hopefully, in the next months too, we will see a peace agreement on Ukraine. At least the hostilities should not continue. Thousands of lives are lost every day, and this war leads to nothing good.
In terms of India's GDP growth, we've seen very robust GDP numbers among large economies of this size. But the worry is if there isn't a trade deal, then it could have an adverse impact on India's GDP growth, down by up to 1%, but perhaps 0.5%. There are some numbers indicating that. You can disagree with that number because it's up and down. But assuming we do have a trade deal and what you see of the Indian economy, where is it headed in terms of GDP growth?
So we're overall bullish, optimistic on behalf of the Indian economy. It's almost growing like 7% for the moment. And we do think this will continue in the years to come. We also have to remember that India has a huge home market. So it is not so dependent on its export of manufactured goods like China and partly even the EU.
Yeah.
So that's why the Indian economy was also very resilient during a COVID time.
Sure.
But India has become now, for example, the third largest manufacturer of mobile phones.
Yes.
It is a big exporter of services, where I do think the future of India lays is a combination of such a young population, 60% is under the age of 30, but also that India is going to be the world's startup nation.
Yeah.
Today there's like 160,000 startups, 120 unicorns, adds a new one every, I think like 10th month or something. Yeah. But today India is the third largest startup nation in the world. I think in 5 years, India will be the largest startup nation in the world. And that's going to fuel the economy, because the future is in knowledge, innovations, and with a young population that is skillful also when it comes to new technology. That's a great opportunity.
That actually segues nicely to what I was going to ask you next. About the next WEF annual meeting, which takes place in Davos every year. You are talking about unicorns in the context of India. But what are some of the key themes that you are going to be looking at? And I ask this because AI is a theme that's been there for the last several years. But it strikes me that the nature of the conversation on AI changes every year. And that has to do with the fact that neither you or I really know where it's going. Sitting as we are over here in New Delhi in September 2025, what are some of the opportunities and concerns which exist as far as business and AI are concerned?
So there is huge investments now in Gen AI sector, but also in other frontier technologies. So far, the investments are much bigger than the profitability of the companies and the revenues of the company. So, but here we see also huge investments, because there is investments related to future anticipated profits in this area. And you can say that the jury is out, but we think that AI is a real change maker in the sense that it will increase productivity globally, maybe with 10% in the coming decade. I think the fact that the US economy is still growing quite robust and not landing, not even soft or hard, is that they're already seeing the effects of the new technologies. But you can never totally exclude, of course, that there can be small bubbles in this, both in AI and also on fintech and that area.
Look, it's been wonderful as always, Mr. Brende, to speak to you, and we look forward to being in the World Economic Forum once again. Always interesting conversations, and hopefully in a milieu where India and the US have reached a trade deal and the entire issue of trade deals is resolved in the case of most countries. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there you have it. Borge Brende telling us a little bit about the possibilities, the opportunities which rise with trade deals, the sense that India and the US might actually get a deal done. There are obviously concerns, not least of all with India's continued import of Russian oil, which New Delhi feels has to continue for a sense of autonomy. So it is complicated. The entire US-China relationship is also very complicated, but the road ahead promises to have a lot of answers, perhaps more answers than questions.